Now, some of the arguments that many put up concerning the those in support of beginning the Omer count after the first weekly Sabbath during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, they refer to the book of Yeshua, or the book of Joshua, chapter 5 and verse 10. And but this passage actually disproves their claim. I'll begin at verse 10. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal, and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. Now, this doesn't mean that they kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This day was not a Sabbath. This is the day when they slaughtered the lamb. All right, the lambs were slaughtered this day on the 14th, and it began at even, but they slaughtered the lambs that afternoon. Verse 11, and they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover. Okay, when was the Passover? On the 14th day. Okay, so on the 15th day, which was a Sabbath, that began the Feast of Unleavened Bread, as we read in Leviticus 23. It says, and they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover. The Passover was the 14th day when they killed it. It wasn't the 14th day, like I said in the beginning. It wasn't the day that they had their Seder meal. It was the day that they killed the Passover lamb. But the morrow after the Passover was the 15th of Abib. And it says they ate unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self same day. Now, the reason why they ate of the old corn of the land, that'll be explained here. Verse 12. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. All right. See, the manna ceased, and they didn't have to eat of the old corn of the land, because that following day they were able to, according to the law, able to begin to harvest crops that day. That's when they're able to eat of the new barley. See, the scripture is just misunderstood by many, but it actually shows that the Omer count is to begin on the morrow after the 15th of Abib, after the first day of unleavened bread. And this gives a historical account of this. Okay. And there's more. Let's check. I'm going to back this up. I've shown scripture. I've pretty much proved this with scripture alone. All right. But let's go to some authoritative references. The works of Philo. Let's get inside the works of Philo and find out what he has to say concerning the wave sheaf offering and how the Omer count was to begin. In the chapter entitled The Special Laws 2, under the section The Sixth Festival, this reads, there is also a festival on the day of the Paschal feast, which succeeds the first day, and this is named the sheaf, from what takes place on it. For the sheaf is brought to the altar as a first fruit, both of the country which the nation has received for its own, and also of the whole land, so as to be an offering both for the nation separately, and also a common one for the whole race of mankind, and so that the people by it worship the living God, both for themselves and for all the rest of mankind.
because they have received the fertile earth for their inheritance. For in the country there is no barren soil, but even all those parts which appear to be stony and rugged are surrounded with soft veins of great depth, which by reason of their richness are very well suited for the production of living things. The main point that I wanted to bring out here is mentioned in the beginning, which says, there is also a festival on the day of the Paschal feast, which succeeds the first day, and this is named the sheaf, from what takes place on it, for the sheaf is brought to the altar as a first fruit. This takes place after the first high holy day of the feast of Passover. Now let's go inside the works of Josephus and see what he has to say concerning the Omer Count. In Antiquities of the Jews, Book 3, Chapter 10, Paragraph 5. I'm going to pick it up in section 249, where it says, the feast of unleavened bread succeeds that of the Passover and falls on the 15th day of the month. That's the high Sabbath, and continues 7 days, wherein they feed on unleavened bread, on every one of which days 2 bulls are killed, and 1 ram, and 7 lambs. Now these lambs are entirely burnt, besides the kid of the goats, which is added to all the rest for sins. For it is intended as a feast for the priests on every one of those days. But on the 2nd day of unleavened bread, which is the 16th day of the month, they first partake of the fruits of the earth. For before that day they do not touch them. And while they suppose it proper to honor God, from whom they obtain this plentiful provision, in the first place they offered the first fruits of their barley, in the manner following. They take a handful of ears and dry them and beat them small and purge the barley from the bran. They then bring 1/10 deal to the altar to God, and casting 1 handful of it upon the fire, they leave the rest for the use of the priests. And after this, it is that they may publicly or privately reap their harvest. They also, at this participation of the first fruits of the earth, sacrifice a lamb as a burnt offering to God. What I really want to point out is that this is done on the 16th day of the month. This is when they go to get the first fruits of the earth. This is when they present the wave sheep offering to the Most High.
Once again, we'll go into the temple, its ministry and service by Alfred Edersheim, and we're going to focus on chapter 13, entitled The Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Day of Pentecost. Let's look under the heading entitled The Morrow After the Sabbath. It reads, the expression the morrow after the Sabbath, Leviticus 23:11, has sometimes been misunderstood as implying that the presentation of the so-called first sheaf was to be always made on the day following the weekly Sabbath of the Passover week. This view, adopted by the Boethusians and the Sadducees in the time of Messiah, and by the Karaite Jews and certain modern interpreters, rests on a misinterpretation of the word Sabbath, found in the same chapter in Leviticus 23. As an analogous allusion to other feasts in the same chapter, it means not the weekly Sabbath, but the day of the festival. The testimony of Josephus, which we've already read, or Philo, which we've already read, and of Jewish tradition, leaves no room to doubt that in this instance we are to understand by the Sabbath the 15th of Nisan or Abib, on whatever day of the week it might fall. Okay?